Welcome to Fables. Typically, we're set up to tell our stories the second Wednesday of the month. But because we're in the middle of a crisis, well, we've gone virtual, and we'll continue to deliver stories, however, on a wide variety of topics until we can all gather one more time at the Next Stage Theater in Putney, Vermont from the Fables main stage. Joining me today, Bethany Kriger-Thies, and today we are talking about cats.
We're going to talk about cats for sure. And anyone who, Bob just did a story, my husband Bob just did a story, which was not about cats, but when he was on the Fables main stage, he did do a story about cats. And people are going to start to think that we have nothing to talk about except cats, and that may be true. But we're just going to keep telling cat stories until someone tells us to stop. And in fact, we asked Fables viewers which story they wanted to hear.
We did.
And they voted for the cat story.
They did. They had a choice. They chose to talk about felines.
So when everyone really hates the story, I just want to say this is your fault. It's your fault. You chose the story.
It's all on them.
Delivering. But before we do that,
you warned me this might happen.
Okay. I really want to take a moment because we are living in a time where cat stories may seem frivolous and ridiculous and tone deaf. And I'm acknowledging right now that, yes, this is not a story that deserves the main stage, but I do think there is honor and value in storytelling, and that silly stories also need to be told. But I would be remiss, and I would not be responsible if I didn't first say that we are not only in a crisis for COVID, but we have a social justice crisis that's happening right now. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to say before we get started that it is my responsibility to at least give the floor, if only for a few moments, to just say that Black Lives Matter. We have a historic duty to serve justice in an equitable and kind way. And it is all of our responsibility to do that and use any platform that we have for any time that we have to just give room for equality and to let people know that if the pendulum of justice swings slowly, but we hope it swings in the positive direction. So I just wanted to say that before we got started.
No, I think it's an important thing to acknowledge. And I think folks like you and I, if we stay diligent, we can swing it back in the right direction. So thank you for bringing it up. Thank you for honoring it. And we'll continue to honor it. And as you said, even though this story is not tone deaf, they are stories. Sometimes a little distraction is nice. So we will look at this as a small distraction before we go and get back to work. I mean, before you can get up and go to work in the morning, you have to go to sleep. So let's go to sleep.
And everyone keep telling your stories, and Fables is so important. So please keep sharing your stories, even if you feel scared and uncomfortable, because now is the time to feel scared and uncomfortable, everyone.
It certainly is. It certainly is. So we're talking about cats, and again, we put this out, and everybody voted on it, and they chose this story. And the other option, refresh the people if they voted, what the other option was.
The other story, which is fantastic, and one day I might tell it if it gets enough votes, is the time that I stole a child's scooter from in front of a local elementary school. Just keep that under your hat.
Just keep that right there. But today, it's about bootleg cats in a nunnery.
That's right. And here we go.
All right.
Remember you chose this. So in late 2017, a parent at my children's school approached me and asked if my family was interested in adopting a kitten. And my husband and I have had several cats. We have now had 5 cats in the last 15 years, 3 of them still living. We'd recently lost a longtime family pet, and we were starting to think about adding a new feline friend. We are not a dog family, and cats have always been our preferred pet choice. So we were still sad and grieving, but the timing was perfect. And apparently this parent had this inside track for kittens. The kittens belonged to her neighbors, and they were available for immediate adoption. So I was given an email for outreach, which is a strange way for you to adopt a cat. You typically go to, your Humane Society. Shout out to the Humane Society, and please support them. That's where we've gotten the rest of our cats. I sent an introduction for this email, and I heavily played into this neighbor connection, indicated our interest in their inside track kittens. And there were kittens available, many, many kittens, but only a few at that point were available for pickup because they insisted on having the kittens stay with their mother for the first 12 weeks. And I found that to actually be very reasonable and reassuring, and we made the request to bring our entire family to this location to look at the available kittens. And they just let us know there will be no fee. Please don't bring any money. We just want to make sure that they go to a good home. I doubt that we were the good home they were looking for, but nonetheless, we put on our best good home faces, and we got in a van and we drove to Richmond, New Hampshire. And that is someplace I've never been. It's a haul, but still free kittens. So we ended up traveling to someplace I'd never heard of. It was called the St. Benedict Center. And in the email, we were told that we were going to meet a Sister Marie Therese in the parking lot at 5 p.m. sharp. And yes, I said, Sister Marie Therese. So these particular neighbors turned out not to be your average neighbors. It happened to be an order of nuns. So as we were driving, and it's about 30 to 45 minutes away from New Hampshire, Brattleboro, depending on how many lights you hit. And we started down this long gravel driveway, and we saw Sister Marie Therese in this very full and ornate and impressive habit. And for anyone who's seen nuns, and I know Pete has seen quite a few, this was particularly stunning. You just kind of wanted to stop and immediately say, yes, Sister Therese. So she's in a full habit, and there was an insignia on her chest of a sword, pierced heart, and it was aflame, and it was surrounded by chains. So I turned to all of the children. They were all still very young at that point. And I said, nobody say a word. We are not Catholic enough to be here. And upon formal introductions, we were escorted through this very strange locked door that led to this very strange dark hallway, which led to an even darker staircase. And at that point, I knew that this cat adoption was going to be unique. We were told that we were in the Immaculate Heart of Mary School, and that Sister Mary Therese was an educator and a member of the Slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Sister Mary Therese, with her key in hand, looked at the children, and she bent down. She got right on their level. And as she started unlocking the door to the classroom where the kittens and their parents were located, she said, "You must remain calm, and you must allow the kittens to become comfortable." And everyone was dead silent. In a house where no one has been silent ever since 2006, you could hear a pin drop. No one was going to argue with Sister Mary Therese. The door slowly opened, and we entered a very small, disheveled classroom with 2 rows of small desks. There were probably 3 desks in each row. And at the front of the room, there was a large black cat, and he was sitting majestically on the top of a teacher's desk like this, with his paws dangling just over the corner. And from here, he surveyed his offspring. 6 kittens poked their heads out from various locations in the room and then went back to the serious business of being kittens. They were jumping from the desk to the floor. They were hiding behind bookcases. They were chasing each other. They were running amok. And I noticed at that point that the room was carpeted, which was a very, very brave choice to host children during the day and then kittens in the evening. And I just had this moment where I said, if you're seamlessly transitioning from daytime education to nighttime cat adoption ring, then maybe carpet care just isn't your top priority. These cats were indeed a product of a very religious house. Their father and their mother were also sister and brother, and their unconventional cat family had been living their best life, roving this obscure property by day and then destroying classrooms at night. And they were producing additional litters of kittens with abandon. And one kitten in particular caught our eye, and he was white with black spots, and he was just your typical kitten, full of energy. And he was bounding about with these enormous paws, and he had ears that were far too big for his small kitten face. And after spending a few more moments in the room, our eyes also fell on a lovely long hair kitten who was the spitting image of her aloof and regal father and uncle. And it was over, and we decided we had to take both of them. We were just going to take 2 cats home. And we immediately decided that we were going to have them fixed because they were already brother and sister and cousins, and their family ties were complicated enough. On the way out of the classroom, we were invited downstairs to a community room where several other sisters sat in a big circle of folding chairs, and they all had kittens in their laps, and there were kittens off to the side in small little cages. And my youngest at that point asked why her school wasn't full of kittens, and I don't know how do you answer that. I just shrugged, not possessing words nor the bravery to go over OSHA requirements in front of our new friends. And as we drove away, I looked at my husband and I just said, "What happened?" And you'll find out later. You'll find out all about the St. Benedict Center. But at home, the kittens just took to exploring, and it didn't take long to realize that one of our cats was not operating at 100% cat capacity, as we called it. And given his unique build and abilities, we named him Buster. And he relied very heavily on his sister and aunt for all of his cues. And luckily for him, her cat instincts were unaffected by incest. But she was also a sociopath. And that just proves that you can't have it all. None of us can. But as far as cats go, he was a value detractor in every possible way. And everyone made excuses for all of his behavior. But our biggest excuse was always like, well, he's inbred. His eyes were vacant, holes, void of knowledge. And it's not that he was a new soul. It's that he didn't even know that he had a soul. And I once came home and I found him sitting in the middle of a street, and we live in a street off a street in town, which does get a lot of traffic. And he was just sitting in the middle of the street with a car parked 10 feet away from his body. And he didn't move, but instead he just continued to sit blocking the road in an act of silent protest, but it was completely absent of purpose. And I walked into the middle of the street and I picked him up and I mouthed sorry to all of the incredulous faces in the car. And he looked up at me wondering why I'd ruined his perfectly lovely street gown. He once got trapped in a plastic garment bag, and this is one of my children's favorite stories. He had crawled in through the bottom, but once in there forgot about the enormous hole on the bottom. And when my son found him in the closet, there were moisture droplets on the inside of the bag from his efforts to escape through every knot hole in the bag, to the exclusion of the perfectly good hole right underneath him. One day right before the holidays, I came home from work and found him gagging on a piece of shiny gift wrap ribbon with a tiny glimmer hanging from his lips. And I pulled, and it was like a scarf trick. It just kept coming. And these are just the near-death misses that we know about. Clearly, this cat had used all of his 9 lives and borrowed some from every cat in the world by his 6th-month birthday. He didn't even groom himself. His black and white checkerboard fur always resembled classic New York subway tile that hadn't been cleaned since the 70s. And although he was stupider than a 4-way stop on a barely traveled country back road, there was an idiotic innocence that made him so lovable and enjoyable. He really liked to play. He liked to have his belly scratched. As anyone knows, like, cats always protect their stomach. He never did. He let anyone who walked by just scratch away at his belly. He liked fake mice. to the detriment of not chasing real mice in the house. And he liked sleeping on top of bathrobes he found on bathroom floors, and he liked almost everything. And we even thought at one point that he liked us, and we adored him. The children in particular were always delighted with his off-brand behavior, and I would always find them in the yard, barely keeping hold of his enormous body and in hysterics about something he'd done. Mom, Buster just was eating a stick. Mom, Buster was sleeping on top of a broken window. Mom, a squirrel was chasing Buster. Their delight was infectious, and you couldn't help but love the big dummy, not in spite of, but because of his detriments. And if you're looking to build empathy and understanding in your everyday life, might I suggest owning an inbred cat from an illegal nunnery in New Hampshire. But may I also suggest doing a quick Google search before you head to an unknown location with the inside track on cats, because our Google searches post-adoption led to interesting article titles such as Radical Traditionalist Catholic Groups, Sour Life in Peaceful New England Town. As it turns out, both the school and the center they were then and are currently still under prohibition from the Roman Catholic Diocese of Manchester for their unacceptable theological positions in violation of the Congregation of Doctrine of the Faith. And believe it or not, it has absolutely nothing to do with their carpeted rooms filled with inbred cats. There you go. That's my story.
I'm telling you, I'm not a cat person, but stories like this could make me a cat person.
One cat at a time. We're just changing dog owners' minds, one cat at a time.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always been a dog guy. I had a cat growing up as a kid in the late '60s. Our neighbor, there was a stray cat walking up his driveway, and my father caught him shooing the cat over onto our property, and my dad came out and he said, "What are you doing?" And they were like, "Hey, your kids would love a cat." At the time, Morris was all over the TV, so we named it Morris. And that cat lived to be 563 years old, like literal human years.
And it's probably haunting your current dog to this day.
I honestly think that cat was probably close to 20 when he just died of natural causes one night in his sleep, peacefully in his bed. But the cat was a champion. Now, if there was ever any chance of me liking a cat, you would have to get me another cat like Morris. And it's not just because he was mine, because he was just too cool for school.
That's why I think you should get more cats. They reflect your personality almost 100%.
So does my pit bull.
Cool, aloof, need you, but maybe don't need you.
Right.
It's all good stuff. Everybody get a cat and go to the Windham County Humane Society and not to an illegal nunnery.
Absolutely. They always have some awesome pets, and they do such a good job in our community taking in the strays and getting animals into their into good homes.
Yes.
Bethany Kriger-Thies, thank you for jumping on the virtual Next Stage Fables stage once again. We appreciate it.
I miss you all. I can't wait to see you in person, and I look forward to hearing everybody else's stories too. This is such an important thing you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.